Hey all, so JD Valverde requested I do a react. Just really said wanted to hear my comments on an opinion video that he saw. The video is titled "Indie Games Just Smoked Every AAA Studio." So let's get into it.
It's happened again. Hades 2 now has the highest 2025 review score on Metacritic. And guess what? Indies now own the top 4 new releases of the year. Not one, not two, the top 4. The first proper AAA.
Okay, I want to be careful about what that means. So indie games now own the highest scores, the highest review scores according to Metacritic. That's cool. So I'm curious where we go with this. What does it mean that indie games own the top 4 spots of Metacritic in 2025?
Game on the list is number 6, Donkey Kong Bonanza, getting embarrassed by teams a fraction of the size, charging half the price, and making much better games. I've been saying this for months. AAA is finished, and 2025 just put the final nail in the coffin. Let me show.
That, to me, seems like a pretty brutal overstatement. Donkey Kong Bonanza did really well. The relative expectations and the way it was treated by reviewers was probably very different from some of these other titles. The success of Donkey Kong Bonanza is not at all in question. It's done incredibly well. It's sold very well. It's made a ton of money. If I look at it from a how much money did these games make, it would be interesting to see. My guess is Donkey Kong Bonanza did significantly more, or at least some amount more than all of them. But I'll agree, we've had some huge indie hits. I think we are jumping from the idea of huge indie hits to, so AAA is dead. I think AAA is distressed, but so is the majority of indie. You still have the best shot of making a successful game if it's a AAA game versus a AA game versus an indie game. The odds go dramatically down as you move towards indie, and you have to keep that in mind. But we have seen some really cool indies come out, and not taking anything away from them, that have done really well, that have reviewed very well. That's awesome. I don't know. I see a lot of people leaning into the AAA is dead. I agree that AAA is in distress. I agree that AAA isn't doing the right things. I've talked about that a lot. It's not fair to say that it's dead, or that it's dying or something like that. I think it needs to change, just like indie gaming has changed pretty dramatically. Like what is right now an indie game would have some amount of time ago only been producible by a AAA game. The increased access to tools, the quality of those tools, the platforms that can get your game out have made things possible that weren't before for indie studios. And so everybody's adapting.
Is finished, and 2025 just put the final nail in the coffin. Let me show you how crazy this actually is. As of today, the top 5 new releases of 2025 on Metacritic are Hades 2 at 94, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 at 93, Hollow Knight Silksong at 92, Blueprints also at 92, and Split Fiction at 91, which, by the way, was published through EA Originals, which is the indie arm of EA, meaning even they had to give a small AA team full creative control to even crack the top 5.
Okay. So multiple of those titles, again, it's so interesting. Like if you look at this through a relative lens, Clair Obscur certainly seems like it is a AA product. Split Fiction is somewhere between a AA and a AAA product. Silksong, the time to develop, years and years and years. Even though it was a small team, it was relatively expensive compared to like a bootstrapped indie team who figured out something. And that's not to take anything away from these titles. I think we're messing with terms here. We're saying that, look at this indie hit. And, I think in the case of like something like Blueprints, yeah, look at that. That's pretty phenomenal. But in some of these wouldn't have been indies very long ago, with how they were developed and with how much they were able to garner attention. Now this all gets into like, what does it mean to be an indie? If we're going to define Split Fiction as an indie, we're clearly painting a pretty broad brush over what indie is from a developmental budget size and all these different things. It's not uncommon for publishers, large publishers, to attempt to give full creative control to other studios to see if something big can work out. But a lot of money might be invested in those things to cause them to work out. And where do you go from being a studio funded by EA to like an indie? What are those definitional differences? That's not clear here. So we're making big claims around, look at this, and aha, AAA is dying. And you're rationalizing this in the case of Split Fiction. And I'm just going like, hey, I think we're overstretching this narrative.
Give a small AA team full creative control to even crack the top 5. The first traditional AAA release on the list is Donkey Kong Bonanza, and here's the bit that should make every publisher squirm and cry. Combine the budgets of those top 4 indie games and you're still nowhere near what the average AAA game costs to make. It's truly insane. And this isn't a coincidence,
So many indie games that released had budgets of practically zero, like so close to zero, it makes no difference. And so from an ROI perspective, they're amazing returns. Like I like to bring up Animal Wall as this great example of a great game made by one person, that got a decent publisher behind it. It didn't have the same type of expectations that you have of a AAA product. Donkey Kong Bonanza, as a Nintendo product, as a Donkey Kong game, has a set of expectations that are unreal. Indie games don't have to meet those expectations. They don't have the same standard to reach, and that's okay. They shouldn't. They're indie games. But Balatro winning Game of the Year, if Balatro had come out from a AAA studio, it probably would have been viewed as a failure by players. The fact that it was made by effectively one person, but, with whatever supports, it's always more than one person, but, with whatever support was around, the fact that Balatro shipped and was successful and as successful as it was, it's like, that's awesome. If Ubisoft had made that game, it would have been panned. Like, what are you doing? What is this nonsense? And so AAA has a much higher budget. They also have these significantly higher player expectations of what it is. And that's just the way it is. Now, you could say like, well, that's a disadvantage. And in some ways it really is. But the advantage of that is you have, as a AAA studio, publisher, whatever, as Nintendo, you have much greater reach. You have a platform in the Switch. You have a way better chance of reaching a lot of people. And that's worth the money that you spent over and above if you were making an indie product. I've seen this argument a few times. I've made a few videos on it already. So maybe you'll go in a different direction with it. I'll keep watching.
Pattern. AAA just can't keep up. And for anyone with half a brain, it's clear why. Indie teams make focused games with original ideas, take risks. They often test in early access, fix stuff that's broken, build trust with players, make games that people actually want to play, get solid reviews, profit. Couldn't be more simple.
Couldn't be more simple. Yet the failure rate of indie games is unbelievably higher than AAA, AA, AAA. It's actually very, very, very difficult. And most of those things he described, the game developers I know, whether they're in the AA space, whether they're in the indie space, whether they're in the funded startup space, whether they're in the AAA space, they're trying to do those same things. They're trying to fix the bugs, focus on a goal. I think the AAA has more difficulty on the focus on one simple thing because it doesn't feel like a AAA game if you do that. And they have an expectation, as I mentioned earlier, that they're trying to meet. That's not, maybe, I do think that contributes to some issues. So in that, I think he's correct, although he's not speaking about that directly. But all those other things they talked about, AAA studios are trying to do that. Some of them succeed, some of them miss. Elden Ring did that really well. Donkey Kong Bonanza did that really well. Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy, they did that really well. There's also then more that they bring as giant studios spending, north of 9 figures on a game. But indies don't have to worry about some of that stuff, even though they are trying to do that. And the vast majority of indie studios completely fail, even though they're trying to do all these same things, or many of them. So we get to pick the winners of the indie titles when there's so many more of them. But, if you're like, oh man, indie's the way to go, I should go make an indie game, that's how to make money in games. The data paints a different story, even though it can feel like that at times. And I think I just want us to stay grounded in this. I am really excited to see indie games succeed and do really well. I'm building like a hobbyist little indie title on my own. I don't have expectations it's going to make $1 gajillion, but like I'm enjoying building it. And I see other people doing the same thing, and that's awesome. Like, and I'm glad to see some of these really nail it. Silksong, it's almost like if you compare Silksong to like Helldivers 2, and I know there's a lot of differences there, but that's not like, oh, I just made this brand new indie game. It's like, dude, this was the most wishlisted thing on Steam for a very long time, following a successful, very difficult title, and they nailed it. Like, they did a great job from all report, and the reviews and everything. But it wasn't like that was coming out of nowhere. It wasn't like there was no expectations around that. Maybe that was why it took so long for them to develop it. So,
profit couldn't be more simple. AAA, well, we all know by now they make massive games as wide as a lake with the depth of a puddle. Too many half-baked features, run everything through committees, the boardroom, the spreadsheets, chasing the latest addiction psychology, get mid-reviews, sell games but not nearly enough to cover their ridiculously bloated budgets, lay off half the developers to cover the cost, rinse and repeat. All this instead of just making a good game. It couldn't be any clearer today. Money.
Instead of just make a good game. Now, are there studios and publishers doing what he just described to some degree or another? Yes. And are they getting punished for it in the market? Yes. Are they failing? Is their stock price dropping? Are they struggling? Yes. Are there other games that are not just focused on making a buck and new monetization techniques and are trying to make a great game? I think they're all trying to make a great game, honestly. And the problem is it's really, really hard to make a differentiated great game. There are people to this day who worked on Concord who would say it was a great game. Well, it wasn't. Why wasn't it? Because players didn't want to play it. Because it didn't meet a player need. You missed. You spent a lot of money. Were you all a bunch of bad game devs? Maybe. I guess that's a very judgmental thing to say. But maybe that's true. Maybe they're just all terrible game devs. I think what's underlying this is that games are really hard to make. Actually, sorry, I should say that differently. Good games, successful games, are very hard to make. And it's, in some ways, you might almost say it's easier to make a focused game that's likely to be great than it is to make a successful game that's going to be good for the business. And maybe the AAA leans in the direction of, can I make a successful game? And so they make trade-offs there, where the indie studios more are chasing that great focused game. Maybe if that's all he's calling out, I'm like, okay, I could see that. One of the things that's interesting there is the indie studios, again, definition of success is very different. These big studios are employing a lot of people, and I don't think they're trying to waste their money as they're doing that. And in fact, I'm disappointed with how many layoffs have occurred across the large studios. But like, they are trying to win. They're trying to make great games. The developers are trying to make great games. Making great games is really hard. And when I see this, it's just like, yeah, you get to look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of indie games and say, look at these indie games. It's simple. Make a great game. Just do that. And all the other ones aren't doing it. And in fact, if they all did, what a great game would be would change, because there's only so much player attention to go towards all of this. And we're all fighting for it to some extent, regardless of where you are in the indie to AAA scale. We're all trying to carve out our slice of player attention, trying to meet that player need, make the great product. And there's people across the board from an indie side who are in it for the buck, and there's people in the AAA space who are in it for the buck. And there's also them that are just interested in for the art and the craft and the, can I make something amazing that players love? It's overly simplified.
It couldn't be any clearer today. Money can buy a flashy trailer, but it can't buy innovation. It can't buy passion. It can't buy good taste. If you're designing for daily logins instead of fun, you're designing to fail. And the most recent proof of that is Hades 2 just showed everyone exactly how it's done. Supergiant spent over a year in early access, letting players test it, giving feedback, fixing what didn't work. Greg Kasavin, the creative director, said that being a small studio means they can fail 50 times a week to get to the good stuff. Imagine that, actually improving your game based on what works and what doesn't, rather than shipping a game that's just good enough because spending any more time on development would add additional costs.
So here, I think I agree with the point he just made about Hades 2. I think you can do that in AAA, and I think we're not, and I think he's right there. So there, I'm in agreement with him. AAA needs to get better at throwing the plan away when the game isn't good. We get too locked in the AAA space to our plans and what we hoped would happen and how we all wanted it to click together when it doesn't. I also think AAA struggles more with things like early access, because you have an expectation that players have whenever you ship that thing even into early access and ask for money for it, or even if you put it out for free. And you have to be very careful, because if you undershoot in a way that an indie studio could, you can really damage the future potential of that game. Even if you listen to all the feedback and you make a bunch of positive changes and you make a much better game, you might have taken the wind out of your own sails. I think that's a concern that people have, and it's a serious concern because you are investing a lot of money into it. I also agree that smaller teams can pivot more rapidly. They do smaller things, but they can do those things and they can fail 50 times a week. I love that phrase. I think you want to bring more of that. One of the things I'm trying to do is bring more of that attitude into the AAA or AA space so that there is a higher comfort with I know what the timeline said. I know there's limitations and constraints, but we're looking at this the wrong way. We need to prioritize making this a great game first, even if that means we don't ship all the different pieces and bits that we want. He said earlier, the breadth of a lake and the depth of a puddle. Can we tighten this in? Should we tighten this in to make it a more clean experience? I think in some cases the answer is yes. But AAA is doing stuff like this too. They are iterating. They are figuring it out. I'm watching Battlefield 6 get ready to roll. And that is a seriously exciting title from a bunch of angles. And it has all the things that you expect of a AAA product. It was a lot of fun. It was a really good game. And there's even more in the main product around the, what I call it the Forge mode, because I'm a Halo guy. These are things that are more expected if you're a AAA and less expected if you're an indie. So you get to stay focused. You get to do this stuff great, love it, do it. Indie, take advantage of the fact that you can be small and light and fast, and also accept the trade-offs of that there's more there's some things that you can't do, and that the definitions of success are different. Also, we're calling out a sequel here to a very successful game. So this is similar to the Silksong example. And I'm not saying that we should take away from Hades 2 being a successful product because it's a sequel. Not at all. That's great. Congratulations. You had a successful product and you built a successful sequel to it. Amazing. Way to go. Crushed it. Love it. Simultaneously, it's not like you came out of nowhere on this one. You had a player base. You had a lot of people who were excited for this. You had a lot going for you that even a lot of AA or AAA games may not have if they're in a new game, new IP kind of space. You have a leg up. And because you stayed small, which is awesome, you make a deeper, more focused product that's not as broad, and it's okay if you don't sell 10 million copies. If you only sell a few, I wouldn't say a few thousand, tens of thousands or maybe 100,000 copies. And you're probably going to sell more than that for something like Hades 2 because there is so much groundswell of interest from a successful prior product. There's just this, is this really what we think of when we think of an indie game? Hades 2. It's a question, right? If I look at it from a pure dollars perspective, maybe the answer is no. If I look at it from a size of team perspective, maybe the answer is yes. But I think we're mixing definitions in this. We need to recognize that these different places, these different types of games, game studios, developers, they have different strengths and weaknesses. And the indie has some really great strengths, but also some pretty severe weaknesses. including the highest failure rate and the most likelihood that you get nothing for all the work that you did. Hades 2, not very likely. Subnautica 2, not very likely. Silksong, not very likely that those were going to come up nothing. They were likely to be hits. They are likely to be hits. But, that is because their original game worked, and it was 1 in 10,000 that did.
The result is a gameplay loop so good it's genuinely addictive, not because we've been psyoped to keep logging in, not because we have to complete the battle pass, but because playing it is actually fun. Every death teaches you something, every run feels different, every upgrade matters. And this is exactly what happens when you ship a game because it's ready, not because shareholders need their bonuses to buy another Ferrari.
I agree with some of where he's coming at this. When we rush products out because we need to hit a quarterly goal in the AA or AAA space, like major publishers doing this, that it does a disservice to everybody, including the development team. It is easier to wait for it to be ready when you are an insanely overfunded, very, very small team because of a previous hit. If I'm running a team of 100 plus people or 200 plus people or 300 plus people running up to launch, an extra 6 months is a lot of money. And there are hard questions that should be asked. Is it worth it to spend an extra 6 months for increased quality? I think the answer, it should be conceivable that the answer is yes there, but we're throwing around a heck of a lot of cash at that point to do it versus very small team of people who are already independently wealthy at this point from prior successes. And can they spend an extra 6 months? Yes. This is not normal for indie studios. This is not normal for indie games to have that type of runway or that type of space to play with. So Hades 2, great, awesome, glad it's awesome. The wait till it's ready has traps at every level of game studio development.
The crazy part is I can't even think of a single 2025 AAA game that even comes close to the level of these top indie games. A few years ago, that was completely unheard of. Let me show you just how embarrassing this is. Take Borderlands 4. Estimated cost of development was around 200 to 300 million. The review score was 82, worse than every single indie in the top 4. And the real insult, Hades 2 cost you...
Okay, again, we're focusing on Metacritic, worse than every single title in the top 4. Yeah, okay, let's compare it to every indie game ever made or in 2025, because you're picking a random AAA title here in Borderlands 4 with a huge budget. And you're just like, well, okay, cool, let's find a random indie title in 2025. How did it do? Oh, it did nothing. It did nothing. Nobody bought it. That's an average indie title. Nobody reviewed it. It doesn't have a Metacritic score. This is, we're messing with our comparison criteria. That's not to say that Borderlands 4 is a great game that everybody should go play. The player scores on it were 4.2. I think that's telling, even as the Metacritic score was 82. We've got to be careful about what we're comparing and how we think about this. We've had a democratization of the tool set that makes games, and that means that a lot more people can make games and try to make them successful. That means you're going to have more titles, and most of those titles are going to fail horrifically. But some will succeed, and some of those successes will probably be indies because of the advantages that indies get. So anyway, yeah, interesting to see. And by the way, we're not to the end of the year. How does Battlefield 6 do? Where is Call of Duty going to sit on this? What about some of the other titles? And you might say like, well, they're probably not going to beat these Metacritic scores, and you might be right. But, when I look back over 2024 and 2025, or 2023, there were big hits that were AAA games. And I don't think one year where if we didn't see some amazing, 97 Metacritic score AAA product or something, that means like, well, AAA is now dead. Like, again, the bringing up the example of Donkey Kong Bonanza and saying, see, we're failing as AAAs, that's absurd. That is not a good comparison.
And the real insult, Hades 2 costs you 25 quid. Silksong is 16 quid. Blueprints is 25 quid. Add them all up and you're still paying the same, if not less than one AAA game. So let me get this straight. Smaller teams making better games for a fraction of the development cost, selling them for half the price. Meanwhile, AAA spends hundreds of millions and somehow delivers worse games that cost more and perform worse. Make it make sense. Take Borderlands 4, 200 to 300 million budget, launched 2 weeks ago, completely broken on PC. Steam reviews went mostly negative because even 5090s couldn't hit 60 FPS in a game that's fundamentally stayed the same since Borderlands 1 in 2009. And how did their CEO Randy Pitchford respond to those complaints? Did he apologize, promise fixes? Of course not. He went on a Twitter meltdown telling players to code their own engine and to show them how it's done. He called Borderlands 4 a premium game for premium gamers, told unhappy players to please get a refund from Steam if you're not happy, while his game sat at mixed reviews on Steam. Mental, pure gaslighting.
So, totally agree. Very, very poor response. Not a good way to treat your players, any players. And, you know, I don't care. Like, I can empathize with anybody. I can, go like, okay, what was he thinking? He's put all his effort in his work and his life, and it's like, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In the end, we're here to make something players love. And he has a lot of passion, but something got away from him here, and he responded in a way that I think isn't good. So that isn't how every AAA responds, and that's not every AAA game. We always have examples of this. I remember when Cyberpunk 2077 came out, a lot of flack. Also, a lot of purchases, and they fixed it over time. CDPR did a good job with the game. They released Phantom Liberty. Like, they turned what was a rough launch into something really great. Diablo 3, rough launch, a lot of issues, the auction house and all these different things. Eventually made a lot of good decisions, made that a game that people still wanted to play. We have seen historically AAA games turn corners on this stuff and recognize that what isn't working and make better decisions. But can AAA be arrogant and egotistical and make a bunch of bad decisions and yell at players and be selfish and greedy? And yes. And in fact, I will even go so far as to say I see more of that in the AAA space or among people who have had prior success and are therefore looked at as like, I don't know, I'm really special because of all the great successes I've had, and look, I'm a big AAA game developer and these sorts of things. I think ego and arrogance are more prevalent there. They still have a higher hit rate and a higher return rate than indie. And I don't want us to lose that. So Borderlands 4 may not make its money back. I know a lot of people are excited to play Borderlands 4. A lot of people probably bought it. Does it make back, if they're selling it for whatever they're selling it for, did they get the 4 million purchases that they need, or really a bit more than that, but 6 million, whatever it was, to make back the money? Maybe they didn't. No indie game has to sell 4 million copies of anything. Now, if they do, it's great. They love it. But they don't have to sell 4 million copies of anything. And they can still be very successful even at a much lower price point. And this is also where the comparison of the price points, like you're looking, I think a lot of this is the problem with it is apples to oranges comparison. And again, to be fair, in the end, the player wants a good game. But okay, if that good game comes in a big AAA package and they think it's a good game, great. If it comes in a simple indie package, great. There are differences around what we expect of those things and how we would define good game in both those contexts. All right, I'll let him keep going.
Not happy, while his game sat at mixed reviews on Steam. Mental, pure gaslighting if ever I've seen it. And this is the problem. Committee design kills good ideas. Investor financing means you ship broken games when the calendar tells you to. Not when they work, not when they're actually ready. They're designing for spreadsheet profits instead of players, obsessing over engagement metrics instead of fun. Then they inevitably lay off the talent to make their numbers look better, all while blaming the players for expecting too much. And they can't escape this pattern because shareholders don't care about game quality. They want profit projections. So when a $300 million game launches broken, the CEO attacks the players instead of accepting responsibility and fixing the actual problems. So
I agree with some of what he's saying there. I think this does speak to one of the issues. He's calling out some of the issues in the AAA. I don't think it means AAA is dead. I don't think it means this is the rise of the indies and look at the complete inversion of our industry. I could be wrong. Maybe that is what AI will bring about, is it will even further democratize all the tools, and suddenly indie studios will create AAA-esque products that people like to play, and maybe that's a future. I don't really buy that right now. But I think this idea that the AAA studios that do get too obsessed with short-term thinking end up losing, and they end up losing badly. And I'm not a fan of how they're responding to some of the things that are going on by, games that aren't working or whatever. I also, though, I will say this, there are studios of all sizes that are so convinced that their ideas are working and will work and are going to be successful that they will run straight off a cliff. And then they will blame everything else except themselves for why that happened. That happens at every scale of development. What's the publisher supposed to do? Well, we'll have some more money to try to fix it. You clearly can't make this game work, or at least I've seen no evidence. Should I just keep throwing money, good money after bad? To let you take it to the finish line, if assuming there is one? What if the whole foundations of this game are bad? Am I better off just shutting this down? These are the conversations when we're dealing with these levels of money and the people involved that we don't want to have, but they're legitimate conversations to have. Should Concord have been given more time? No, the foundation of that product was wrong. To give it more time would have probably meant laying off the vast majority of the team and bringing it all the way back to a concept or an ideation phase. It didn't work. And another 6 months or another year, another 2 years at the burn rate that they're sitting at, that is not something that you should just say publishers should figure that out, because for an indie studio, they can do that. Yeah, they can, because it's different constraints. It's a different environment. But doubling down on something, you do not blame the players. AAA, if you're out there. Indies, if you're out there. AA, if you're out there. Whoever's out there. This is a weird modern thing that's in a lot of media. This isn't successful because the players are wrong. What? You're making a product for their entertainment. I don't care who you are. I don't care what scale your studio is, or whether you're making movies or songs or whatever. It doesn't even matter if you believe in some value system where you're actually right and the players are right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't get to blame them, because your job, if you were trying to make a profitable game, was to make something that they wanted to engage with, that they found compelling. And you failed. Okay? Do not blame the players. CEOs, don't go yelling at players. Designers, everybody, producers, don't go yelling at players. Well, they should have played it. They should have liked it. They didn't understand the game. That's your problem. That's always your problem. It always comes back to it's your problem.
So let's just obliterate this narrative once and for all and admit that 2025 is the year that indies proved it all wrong. Clair Obscur, 30-person team, the game has now sold over 4.4 million copies and 93 Metacritic score. Blueprints essentially
4.4 million. If Borderlands sold that many, it's borderline. For Clair Obscur, it's an unbelievable success. And by the way, 30-person team, that's not an indie studio.
One bloke working for 8 years, a 92 Metacritic score, one person just embarrassed entire AAA boardroom.
No, he made something different. He sat in a different context. He did an amazing thing. The 8 years working on a game by yourself is like a Stardew Valley-esque story. I think Stardew Valley was 9. And it's awesome. I'm glad you got it out there, and I'm glad it was successful. I'm glad you did such a good job. Most of the people who attempt to do that, who spend those 8 years or those 9 years or whatever, making their solo project indie game, do not succeed. They fail horrifically. The vast majority, the highest likelihood, was that Blueprints would be a failure. It was a success, and awesome. Way to go. But in some sense, it's almost a success of the odds. It's a success that in a graveyard of failures, some of these are likely to be hits. Some of these are likely to work out. And so, anyway, yeah.
Song, 3-person, Team Cherry, 5 million players in the first few days, £50 million in revenue on Steam alone, 92 Metacritic score, crashed Steam because too many players wanted to buy it at launch. So there's your evidence.
I already talked about why I think Silksong is, one, a very impressive game, Also why it's a weird game to compare to just a random indie product. It is a very, very unique and special indie product. Most indie products do not have the highest number of wish lists on Steam, bar none. They just don't. And that anticipation had been building for years. Impressive, actually, really impressive that they delivered against that. But it's like I said, it's almost not an indie game.
Small teams, focused games, working products, happy players, millions sold. Meanwhile, every AAA release this year fails all of the things that make indies so successful. A mess of half-baked features, they promise fixes after the game's already out and you've already paid, FOMO everywhere, daily login bonuses, battle pass timers, fear of missing out, boring, uninspired, and they ship broken to hit quarterly deadlines. All the shiny trailers, sponsored streams, and ad campaigns in the world can't fix broken fundamentals. Not anymore. Not in 2025. It's done.
Some of the games that are going to make the most money, admittedly, had the highest cost, but are going to make the most money this year are AAA games. You're locking in a Metacritic score because it paints the story you want to paint. Your comparisons feel a little broken to me. And especially as we run into a pretty loaded last quarter of the year with some big AAA releases coming out, you may be speaking too soon. You may not. And you may just go, well, they didn't hit that high Metacritic score. Battlefield 6 didn't hit that high Metacritic score. So even if it is a phenomenally successful game that makes untold, ridiculous oodles of money, it'll be like, yeah, but it didn't hit, it was only an 89 Metacritic. Okay. What about when GTA 6 drops? What are you going to say about AAA then? When that game pulls in, I don't know, I think right now it's expected to make like some number of billions. I've heard like 79 billion within a couple of months or something like that. Maybe sooner. What are you going to say then? Does that mean AAA is alive again? What if it's also a really high Metacritic score? What if it's like a 96 Metacritic score, GTA 6? Does that mean, indies are dead? We can't be this reactive. And I get it. It's the internet. We like reacting to stuff.
Which brings us to the real problem here, trust. Because when the fundamental game design is broken, charging 70 quid becomes insulting. Indies charge less because they have to earn our trust with every release. No brand recognition, no marketing budget. Just here's our game. We hope you like it. And when we pay £25 for Hades 2, we get 80 plus hours of content, developers who actually listen and most importantly care. AAA charges double, if not triple, the price because they think their brand name alone is worth the cost. When you know you're not getting a finished game that works with no microtransactions, no season passes, no FOMO, price becomes irrelevant. When you expect to be milked for more money after already paying full price, every penny feels like a gamble on a slot machine that's always rigged against you. 2025 is the year everything changed.
If I want to eat good beef, just so you know, I'm a fan of Arby's. Simple sandwiches, not too expensive. I like them. There's also this place in LA called Mastro's where you can spend way, way, way past $100 on a steak. It's a different price point. It's a different experience. It's a really good steak. I've been to Arby's a lot more, and I enjoy Arby's. It's a good experience. I've been and enjoyed Applebee's, and they have beef options available. I go to Red Robin and get a burger. They have some good. These all operate at different price points because they offer me different things at a different place. And, I'm in different places in life when I take them on. I'm not, by the way, comparing Mastro's to a AAA game or Arby's to the indie studio or something like that. I'm actually just saying, like, look, we have different price points for a meal and vastly different price points, far greater difference in the price point between meals that you can get at restaurants than there are between video games that you can play. So we have that for a reason. The indie studio can charge less and probably should charge less because if they charge like a $70 AAA game, people would be annoyed at them. Be like, this isn't that type of experience. Some people might still buy it. If I'm the giant AAA studio, and I charge less, maybe more people would buy it. But also, I do have the much larger dev team, the much larger base cost, and an expectation that I am going to have a higher price point, but that I give you all the things you get in a AAA game. These are not the same things. And it's okay that we operate at different price points. The reality is a lot of AAA games have made money, even though they're very high priced, because people felt it was worth it. And so they were willing to invest the money. I don't know how much money Battlefield 6 has already made on pre-orders. I'm holding the line and not pre-ordering it, even though I'm very excited about it. I'm going to wait till it launches and actually see maybe a day or two of how it lands, just to make sure it's not a broken, horrific mess that somehow went from being really good to awful. But, I'm waiting. And yet I know that they've already made more money on pre-orders than, 99.999% of indie games have before the game is even out. And we can say well, that's just because they're greedy. It's no, they've made a game that people want to play. And is that just because of fancy trailers and microtransactions? No. I think it's because people have been looking forward to playing a good Battlefield game. All right.
2025 is the year everything changed. Small teams, tight scopes, ruthless attention to detail. They're not just beating AAA on quality and price, they're proving the entire corporate model is broken. This is the moment everything changes. We're winning this fight. Every indie game you buy, every AAA disaster you skip, every time you support a small team over a massive corporation, you're voting for better games. Keep doing it. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so same take I've seen, rise of indies, blah, blah, blah. Again, what are they going to say when GTA 6 launches? Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe GTA 6 will flop. I think that's very likely. I think that's about as likely as Silksong flopping. But, I guess it could happen. What happens if in Q4 we do see some AAA things just absolutely knock it out of the park? What if Battlefield 6 just absolutely crushes it? Yeah. 2025 is not the year everything changed. I feel like we could have said this at times in the past as well. I do feel like we're seeing a sharper distinction in the price point at minimum, in some ways. And we are seeing the sustained indie success of sequels coming out. Like Subnautica 2 will probably be something that a lot of people want to play. Yeah, it's a lot of apples to oranges comparisons to me. I think it paints this compelling picture if you don't really understand much about the industry. But if you do, you look at it and you go, it's just a hot take. It's a hot take. Indie games just smoked every AAA studio. You know what? Nobody's made as much money as Monster Hunter Wilds, as far as I know, this year. So, anyway, yeah, there's my thoughts. Take I've seen before. I disagree with it. And I'm very curious what all these people say if and when Battlefield 6 is highly successful, if and when GTA 6 is highly successful. Will that mean that AAA is back? Will that mean that indie is struggling? Or will that just mean that, hey, it's a big world out there. Sometimes these studios are successful. Sometimes those studios are successful. And we keep cycling and we keep learning and we learn at different rates and we'll figure it out. Or we won't and we'll go out of business and then new ones will rise. Because you have to remember, most of the AAA studios that are out there started as indies. And we're all just cycling. So, have a good one. Does this sound familiar? You're in a leadership role at a game studio. Everyone is busy working. No one has any time. But the actual game itself isn't in a good spot. Maybe it's the tech. Maybe it's the lack of a validated prototype. Maybe it's that every person seems to have a different idea about what we're trying to build. But you've got a job. There are reports to send, meetings to schedule and facilitate, the occasional season of performance reviews to go through. And everyone is always so busy. When you step back, it makes you wonder if everyone is just going to keep slowly walking towards the abyss until the project or game fails. Is this what it means to be a leader in games? In tech? To endlessly repeat the same sequence of meetings without really moving the needle? To spend hours trying to get Jira tickets and dashboards where they should be? To pretend that everything is fine when you know deep down it really isn't? It doesn't have to be this way. You can make a difference. You can help your team and game succeed, but sometimes you need a bit of help to get there. I've started a game dev leadership accelerator. It aims to level up leaders who see opportunities to make a difference but don't know how to capitalize on them. We'll walk through what it means to lead well and give you tools to understand your organization's challenges and implement changes to overcome them. Game dev is hard. Knowing how to lead will give you an edge. It will still be hard, but you'll be ready to tackle it. If you're interested, let me know below. Hit the link. I hope to see you in the accelerator because I believe better leaders will help teams make better games, and I look forward to someday playing what you create.